The Bible is a living word that reads us as we read it. It's a person, a voice that proves that time is not linear, as one sentence can confirm the past, guide the present, and declare the future. You are here. I am here. He is here. We are here right now, in the tomorrow of yesterday and in the yesterday of tomorrow. I thank you for joining today. So we're back. Thank you so much for joining once again. In our last episode, we talked about the struggle of the famine, those years that the land of Egypt and the surrounding nations were without food. And the Egyptians were struggling, like the struggle was for real, for real. And it was to the point where they had already taken all of their money to Joseph and tried to purchase resources, tried to purchase food. They exchanged their livestock. And in the last episode, we talked about how they got to such a level or point of desperation that they even gave up their land and their bodies. They became servants to the king of Egypt, Pharaoh. And Joseph implemented this idea, hey, I'm going to give you these seeds. You go plant the seeds. Make sure you take a fifth to Pharaoh, and the four-fifths of the harvest you get to keep, you get to eat off of. And so that's where we left off in the last episode. But interestingly enough, despite the struggle and how the struggle was impacting the Egyptians and surrounding nations, the Israelites, Joseph's family, they were thriving. They were doing well, and he was taking really good care of them. The Hebrews acquired property, and their families were expanding as they were being fruitful and multiplying. Before you know it, 17 years passed, and uh, Jacob gotten older. Of course, they all got older in 17 years, but the word got out that Jacob was getting ill, and he sent for Joseph, and he told him, like, son, I'm getting older, and soon I'm gonna die. But when I die, do not bury me here. Take me back to the burial place that Papa Abraham bought. If you recall, some episodes back, Abraham actually struck a deal with the Hittites, and he bought a plot of land in Machpelah, and that became the family burial place. And so Jacob just made it plain to Joseph, like, I don't want to be here. Egypt is not home for me. And so take me back home after I die. And so not long after that, Joseph took his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, to visit Jacob. And Jacob told Joseph about the promise that God blessed Abraham with, Isaac with, and also Jacob, and how there was this covenant promise to make their family fruitful and multiply their descendants, and to make them a multitude of nations and give them the land of the Canaanites. And so during this conversation, something really interesting happened. Now, mind you, Jacob had 12 sons of his own. If you recall, he favored Joseph openly. But Joseph's brothers didn't like that too much, and they ended up doing things out of jealousy that they lived with this dark cloud of guilt over them for many years, I imagine. But it ended up serving them in the end. But Jacob had a lot of sons. But in this conversation that he's having with Joseph, as he is trying to get his affairs in order before he dies, Jacob actually claimed Manasseh and Ephraim as his own sons. Now, he told him, he's like, I'm claiming these two as mine. Any others that you have, they'll be yours. But what he did when he claimed Manasseh and Ephraim as his sons is he essentially promoted them in his will, because now Manasseh and Ephraim are in line to also inherit from Jacob rather than to get their inheritance from Joseph. So Jacob was promised land, right? That's the covenant promise from God. His sons are about to capture some land. It's going to be some chapters from now. Like, we got some books to go. But essentially what's going to happen is that his sons are going to acquire all of this land, and they're going to divide the land per son or per tribe. So each son represents a tribe of Jacob, who was renamed Israel, which is why we call them the Israelites. So when he had 12 sons, you take all of this land, you divide it by 12, and everybody gets their portion. However, when he said, I'm going to claim Manasseh and Ephraim as your sons, they are going to get Joseph's inheritance, right? They're in line to inherit what would otherwise belong to Joseph. So what Jacob did was he gave Joseph a double portion of the inheritance because it's a 2-for-1 kind of deal. So Jacob told Joseph, like, I didn't think I'd ever see you again. But now not only have I seen you, I've been able to see your sons, and I'm going to bless them. And that's exactly what he did. So Joseph positions his sons in front of Jacob. Jacob, mind you, he's getting older and he's losing his vision. And I don't know if you recall the story of Isaac. When Isaac got older and he lost his vision, Jacob went in dressed as his brother and deceived his father into blessing him. But here we have Jacob. His vision is escaping him, and he goes to bless Manasseh and Ephraim. Remember how we talked about birthrights and blessings typically would go to the firstborn son. So the firstborn was just by birth the one in line to receive the blessing and the birthright. They would have this position of leadership, as well as they would get a double portion of whatever the tangible inheritance was. But what happened here, when Ephraim and Manasseh were standing before Joseph, he went to bless them. And typically the blessing would come from the right hand. Symbolically, the person that they would touch with their right hand was the person that they were giving the blessing to. But here, even though Joseph positioned them where Jacob should have touched Manasseh, which was the oldest of his sons, with his right hand, Jacob crossed his hands where he put his right hand on the youngest son, Ephraim, and he put his left hand on the oldest son, Manasseh. And when he did this, he was positioning the youngest above the oldest. And Joseph was like, no, Pops, no. It said that he got angry. Joseph was upset about this. And he's like, no, Pops. And he tried to switch his hands. He tried to tell his father, like, no, this is out of order. Like, this isn't how this is supposed to play out. And Joseph let him know, he's like, yo, I know exactly what I'm doing. I am fully aware. I'm getting old, I'm about to die, but I'm still sharp. He said, Manasseh, the oldest, he's going to be great. But his younger brother, Ephraim, he's going to be greater. And so he ended up blessing the sons, and he made Ephraim more prominent than his older brother in the tribes of Israel. Jacob ended up blessing Joseph, and he's like, may these boys preserve our family name, and may their descendants multiply greatly. So actually, the Ephraimites turned out to be very prosperous and influential in Israel's history. And we'll touch on that a lot more in later episodes if the Lord wills. But certain people such as Joshua, who was a protege of a really great leader who we will study, he actually is the one who led the Israelites into the promised land. And he was from the tribe of Ephraim, and also the first king of the northern kingdom. There's going to be some drama, and the kingdom is going to split. The Ephraimites had a lot of influence. We'll get into what kind of influence, but for me, it just goes to show that we can be blessed and be put in a position, but without relationship with God, that can very easily go to our heads and we can be led astray in our own strength and our own power if we have a blessing, but we don't have the guidance and have the accountability that we find in relationship with God. So Jacob blesses Manasseh and Ephraim, blesses Joseph. He then gathers the rest of his sons and he's about to just read them. He's like, yo, let me tell y'all how things are gonna play out after I die. And he goes down the line and he starts he starts with Reuben. And I'm not gonna go into what he said of every son, but he starts with Reuben and he's like, Reuben, my boy, you are my firstborn. I imagine Reuben kind of has his chest stuck out a little bit and his chin up. He's like, yeah, I'm the firstborn. He's prepared to get this blessing because of his birthright. And he's like, yeah, Reuben, you're my firstborn. You're my strength. You're the first rank and in power. And however, not anymore. Mm-mm. You will be first no longer, is what he told him. He's like, because you know what? Remember when you lay down with my wife, Bilhah? Yeah, consider that to be your blessing, son, because you defiled my marriage bed and you were way out of line. I didn't address it then, but I'm going to address it now. And Reuben, in that moment, realized, like, man, when he disrespected his father by laying with his wife, he lost the blessing that he otherwise had coming to him. And he had to live with that. And so Jacob continues. He goes to Simeon and Levi. I don't know if you remember these two guys, but their sister was violated by this young prince, Shechem, and they didn't let that fly. Like, they were very strategic in the way that they sought revenge. I don't know if you recall, but they're like, oh, yeah, you want to marry the women in our troop. Yeah, but you need to get circumcised first. So all these dudes went and got circumcised, and then they went in when they were at their weakest and totally annihilated them. But at this time, Jacob brings that up and he's like, Simeon, Levi, y'all are two of a kind, and your weapons are instruments of violence, and I wouldn't want to be caught in a dark alley with you two. And then he just starts cursing their anger and their wrath, and I'm pretty sure they were deflated, just like Reuben was. Like, man, that's not what we were really expecting Pops to say, like on his deathbed, but gracious. And then he speaks about Judah, and he tells Judah, son, all your brothers will praise you. And you're going to put your enemies in a chokehold, and your relatives are going to bow before you, and rulers are going to come from your bloodline, and they will continue to come from your bloodline until the Messiah comes. He didn't just straight out say until the Messiah comes, but essentially what he was saying was that Jesus Christ would come from the bloodline of Judah. And this was really significant to me because all of what's happening right now it's seemingly out of order. Mind you, Judah was number 4. Like, he was number 4 in terms of birthings. He was birthed by Leah, who was a woman that Jacob didn't even want to be with. That was the one that Uncle Laban actually snuck in at night on their wedding night. And when Jacob thought he was celebrating marriage with Rachel, he woke up the next morning and realized it was Leah. It was an oopsie. It was it was a buy one, get one, but really not, because he worked for Rachel too. Anyhow, Leah wasn't even the love of his life, but Leah was the mother of Judah. He was number 4. And yet this is the blessing on him. He has the honor of being the ancestor of the chosen one, Jesus Christ. And That seems to be something that you would see the firstborn being blessed with. But all of these blessings are just the way that Jacob blessed Ephraim over Manasseh, the way that Reuben was removed from being in first place, the way that Joseph was actually the one who received the double portion. Joseph was the firstborn of Rachel. So he did get the blessing and the birthright in that sense. And then Judah here being the recipient of such a respectable and honorable blessing and prophecy. And Judah goes down the line and he just reads all of his sons and lets them know how they're going to move and how things are going to unfold for them. And it's interesting because this is a foreshadowing of another blessing when Moses down the line is going to bless all of these different sons and tribes also. But after Jacob goes down the line and he blesses all of his sons, or not really, because they not all of those were blessings, but when he goes and he reads them, he kind of tucked his feet back under the little blanket and he reminded them, like, don't leave me here now. I done told you already, like, make sure when I pass away to take me back to the family plot. And so then Jacob breathed his last, and we will stop there. I think that this portion of the story was really significant to me because it just goes to show, regardless of what we think we may have coming to us, what belongs to us. And if it doesn't belong to you, don't even expect it, because there's no reason that, other than the fact that it was theirs, Joseph received the blessing that he did. I imagine at some point he may have felt like even more of an outsider, beyond the fact that his brothers weren't really feeling him that much when he was younger, but he didn't grow up around his family. He was in his late teens when he was sold and was then purchased in Egypt. He spent more years in Egypt than he did around his clan, his troop, his culture. And the same with his sons. Like, his sons didn't grow up around their cousins or their uncles or aunts or their granddad or any of that. They were outsiders, but they were blessed because there was a blessing on their life. And the same goes with, as I mentioned, Judah. He's 4 out of 12. He's not the firstborn from any of the wives. He's just put in there, but he wasn't overlooked. It wasn't like, man, I'm not the first of any of these wives. Like, I'm just going to get my little slice of the pie and be grateful when there's a blessing, when there's an anointing, when there's a calling on your life, when there's something that belongs to you. No matter how many other people there are that qualify, or no matter how many other people are vying for or competing for that position or for that gifting or for whatever that is, if it's yours, and you can take that to the bank and cash it in. Yep, so we'll stop there, and I thank you so much again for all of your time, and until we meet again, bye for now.